everyone, it's Chrissy from First Day of Home. The weather's getting a little cooler outside and it's time to get spooky with some Cricut Halloween crafts. In this video, I'll be covering a lot of different types of projects from DIY home decor to fashionable accessories you can wear. Let's go ahead and dive in. To start, we're going to be making a few different designs of Halloween earrings. I've already formatted these earrings, and if you want to learn more about how to make these designs from scratch, I have a whole video on how to make earrings with Cricut that I'll link to up here. First, I'll start with some ghost earrings cut on faux leather. I'm going to choose thin garment leather as my material here in Cricut Design Space. And then I'm going to select more pressure for this particular type of material. And I'll be using the strong grip mat. I always like to use some painter's tape or masking tape around my faux leather sheets to make sure that they don't shift while the machine is cutting. This is just a really good practice anytime you make earrings. One thing you'll want to remember is to move your star wheels all the way to the left and right sides of your machine so that you don't damage the leather as the Cricut cuts it. I'll also be swapping out the standard fine point blade for this black deep cut blade. This just does a better job of cutting through thicker materials like this faux leather sheet. And I'm going to link all of these supplies down below in the description box in case you'd like to buy the same materials. Before unloading my mat, I always like to pick up an edge of my design just to make sure that it cut all the way through, because if it didn't, I can process it again. These ghosts came out perfectly, so I'm going to proceed with making the teardrop earring backs for this design. The next design I'm making involves some foil iron-on, which looks so pretty on faux leather. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my overlay piece, making sure I have the mirror on. You'll want to place your foil iron-on with the shiny side or colored side down on a regular standard grip mat. We don't need the strong grip mat for this particular part of the project. However, since my mat is not super sticky and I'm using a small scrap piece, I'm going to go ahead and tape it down just to make sure it doesn't move around on me. Next, I'm going to weed that iron-on vinyl and get all of the pieces picked out. I'm making this cute spiderweb pattern, and I'm going to put it on a black faux leather background. It's going to look really cute, and if you want to know how to make designs like this, again, go check out my video on making earrings with Cricut. It has the whole step-by-step process of how to do an overlay like this using the slice method. Here's a preview of what that design will look like, but before we get to ironing it on, let's go ahead and make some holes in our earrings. I like using this leather punch rather than trying to get the Cricut machine to make these tiny holes for the hooks. I just find that this makes a more reliable hole and you don't have issues with the Cricut not cutting. So you simply figure out where you want your hole and press down, and boom, you have a perfect earring hole. I like to make double-sided earrings since my faux leather is only one-sided, so sometimes I'll make a hole through both pieces at the same time before gluing them together. To glue the front and back pieces, I sometimes use a leather glue, sometimes I'll use tacky glue. A lot depends on the type of faux leather you're using and the material, so I would encourage you to experiment and see what works best for you. Now that we have our pieces attached with holes in them, I'm going to use my Easy Press Mini to attach that iron-on vinyl on that black faux leather. All of the instructions for transferring foil iron-on onto faux leather are found in the Cricut Heat Guide, so I will put a link to that down in the description box below, which will have step-by-step instructions for you. After preheating my faux leather and placing my design down, I'm going to cover the design with a Teflon sheet and follow the instructions for how long to press it. In this case, it told me to press it for 30 seconds at low heat. After my design was completely cool, I pulled back the carrier sheet to reveal some really cute Halloween earrings. The final step is adding our hooks. Again, I covered this in my other video on making earrings with Cricut. You simply add some jump rings and some earring hooks that you can find at most craft stores or online. And I think these turned out so adorable. I love the little ghost design. And all of these earrings would be great for school parties or trick-or-treating with your kids. In fact, we're going to be using one of these designs to coordinate with our next project. I've been dying to try puff vinyl, so I felt like Halloween would be the perfect excuse. I'm using this design that you can find in my fall bundle on my shop. It says pumpkin spice and everything nice. After uploading it to Cricut Design Space, I decided to remove some of the extra stars and dots. I want to keep this design pretty simple since I'm using puff vinyl for the first time, and I'm even using 2 different brands of puff vinyl. So it's going to be a little tricky to make sure I get the settings just right. For this middle design, you can see that little peak of orange right here. I'm going to use the contour tool to remove that, again, in the spirit of simplifying. So the next step would just be adding a template, which is optional. I like to add a template just so I can see how this would look on a t-shirt. And the template or guide is just there to help us with formatting and sizing. It will not actually be cut by your machine. So I'm going to place this in the center of my t-shirt guide to kind of judge how large I want it to be. The other consideration here is how large your heat press is. You may want to go with something smaller if your heat press is on the smaller side. Once I have everything formatted as I want it, I'm going to hold Shift and select all of the layers and click Attach so that they will stay formatted the way I see them on my screen. I'll do the same thing with these orange accents on the bottom. Then I'll click Make, and this is my last chance to make sure everything is formatted as I want. For this orange piece of vinyl, I'm actually going to scoot things over a little bit to save vinyl. So I'll move these pumpkins to the middle, move the accents to the top. I'll select Puff Iron-On as my material and then make sure Mirror is on. You'll want to place the shiny side down. I'm going to start with the black vinyl first, and I like to use a brayer tool just to make sure that it's really nicely adhered to my green mat. It looks like everything cut really nicely, so I can go ahead and unload my mat and then proceed with the next color vinyl. As I start to weed this piece of black vinyl, I'd love to hear from you and learn where you're watching from and what Cricut machine you own. I always love hearing more about you and your Cricut journey and maybe what you'd like to see me make next. This puff vinyl is really easy to weed. It feels a lot like regular iron-on vinyl, so far I'm feeling pretty good about this. I'm going to attempt to press both the black and orange at the same time. So I'm cutting my orange pieces down so that they will not overlap with the black. And you'll see here, I'm using my t-shirt guide that I just bought. I'm loving this tool. It just helps to line things up and measure how far down to place your design. So I have my orange underneath the black here, but I'm making sure that none of the lettering is overlapping. I'm using my bigger heat press since the design is a little bit too big for my easy press. And I'm going to start by preheating the t-shirt and then lining up my design. I will say you don't need a special brand of t-shirt for puff vinyl. Unlike infusible ink projects, any cotton or cotton polyester blend will work just fine. So I pressed my designs using the heat settings kind of in between the 2 different brands of puff vinyl. And I think this turned out absolutely amazing. I love this textured look. It just looks a little more professional than regular iron-on vinyl. You can see how the orange is nicely raised and the black almost looks like velvet. I'm in love with this puff vinyl t-shirt and the matching earrings. I think this would make a great gift for teachers or maybe just for yourself. And if you're looking for another great gift idea, here's one of my favorite projects for Cricut. For the next project, I'll be using infusible ink transfer sheets. You do want to make sure you're using a compatible blank. Here I'm using a Cricut brand mug. In Cricut Design Space, I have this design I got from Creative Fabrica, which I highly recommend. I'm going to put a link down below for 10 free designs that you can sign up for. I'm attaching all of the elements I want to cut here. The square, let me change the color here so you can see it, the square and the spider webs and spiders. I'll be cutting on a mat, and here's a preview of what that will look like. I'm cutting with my Cricut Maker, but you can also do this with a Cricut Joy. Just select infusible ink transfer sheets, make sure mirroring is on, and apply your infusible ink transfer sheet to a standard grip mat. I like to use a brayer on some of these sheets that I've had in my stash for a while. And I do want to mention this sheet looks brown in color, but once we apply the heat, it's going to turn to black. So what you see is not what you get in infusible ink. it will take on a darker shade once we apply the heat. As a reminder, with infusible ink transfer sheets, you really want to gently pull the design away that you don't want when you're weeding. You want to be careful because the material is almost like paper, so you could rip the design if you're not careful. You want to just bend the paper to crack the design and then peel gently to remove those pieces you don't want. To prep your mug, you'll wipe it down first with some rubbing alcohol, then you can follow it with a lint roller to make sure that you get any fibers that might be stuck on the mug. Then you'll wrap your design around the mug. I like to place it this way and wrap the design with it facing away from me. And then I like to place lots of heat-resistant tape all around the mug design. I find that this really helps to make sure no pieces lift while it's pressing, and it helps reduce blur and other issues you might have when using the mug press. So here's what my mug looks like after I tape it all up. I know some people don't put as much tape. I just say, why not? Be careful. My mug press is ready because the green light is on, so I insert my mug, press down the lever, and then wait for the dots at the top to complete. After 5 to 6 minutes, your mug should be ready, so you'll want to carefully lift it out. Do not touch the mug as it will be extremely hot. 15 to 20 minutes later, once the mug is completely cooled, you can remove that heat-resistant tape and your transfer sheet. I've made a lot of mugs, and I am still always amazed at the results. This would make a really cute teacher gift if you wanted to fill it with some candy, or just enjoy it yourself. You deserve it, right? I might just set up a spooky coffee bar and enjoy it as a decor. If you have some books from high school or middle school that you are not planning on reading again, this next craft might be for you. I'm taking this book that I did not love the first time, and I'm definitely not planning on reading this intro piece, so I'm just cutting a few pages from the intro to the book, and then I'm going to place them on a standard grip mat. We are going to make some cute little book page ghosts. You may have seen these on Pinterest, and I thought, why not try this with Cricut? So I'm just going to trim them down and place them in different directions to make sure it fits on the mat. And then in Cricut Design Space, I'm going to try to make 6 to 9 of these ghosts because I'm planning on using them on my fireplace mantle as Halloween decor. I'm going to use my mat and then reorient some of the ghosts to make sure that they line up with my book pages. I'm going to select copy paper as my material type, but I want it to be honest here that sometimes things don't go as planned. So you can see here my machine ripped a little bit of the page. I may need to go back and do less pressure next time, but if this happens to you, you can often salvage the piece by just using scissors to cut the pieces that didn't cut. If this happens to you, try changing the pressure setting to less pressure or more pressure and do a test cut to see if that helps. As a finishing touch, I'm taking some of this distressed ink that I absolutely love, and I'm adding some shading around the ghosts. This gives the ghost more of a vintage vibe that I think looks so sweet and classic, so I think this is going to look really cute on my fireplace mantle. I used a piece of jute twine and mini clothespins to attach the ghosts on my fireplace. This gave just the perfect touch for Halloween that's not too spooky, but kind of fun and quirky. For this next craft, we're going to make a fall tea towel. I'll be using heat and bond to create the applique and some fabric scraps that I had on hand. I'll also use some trim with this fall ribbon and some stitch witchery. I'm going to use this simple pumpkin shape that I uploaded into Cricut Design Space. It's not absolutely necessary, but I'm going to go ahead and select the orange pieces and attach them and do the same with the leaf and stem. I'm going to select cotton bonded as my material type, and then you'll want to make sure that your image is mirrored. To prepare my fabric, I'm going to apply the heat and bond to the back of the fabric and press it according to the instructions. You only have to press about 2 seconds to get this to adhere, so I did this to this piece of fabric that will be my pumpkin and the smaller piece of fabric that will be a pumpkin stem. Next, I'll place my fabric onto a fabric grip mat with the paper facing up. I like using a brayer to make sure it's nice and stuck on my mat. I'm also going to replace my fine point blade with a fabric blade. I just like having this dedicated blade for fabric projects because it helps the blade last longer. My Cricut Maker 3 cut this fabric beautifully. You can also use the bonded fabric blade with the Cricut Explorer machines. It's a great tool to have in your pocket. I repeated the same steps to cut out my leaf and stem, and in no time I had my fabric appliques ready. Now I'm going to prepare my tea towel with my Easy Press, and I folded it in half to create a nice midpoint line. You can see here, this is going to help me line up my design right in the middle. I like to place things where they're going to be pressed and start with one piece of the applique. So you just peel off that paper backing. Then you have your applique ready to be applied with heat. So I'm just going to do the center oval first, and I just lined up the ribbon to kind of see the spacing. And it only takes a few seconds to press this. You can use a household iron or an Easy Press. And once I have my center design placed, then I'm going to add in the rest and get them nice and lined up. In just a few minutes, I have my applique applied to the towel. You do want to press it on both sides to make sure it's secure. Then it was just a matter of adding the trim using that stitch witchery, which is actually meant for hems of pants and things like that, but I found that it worked just as well with this ribbon. You do need to apply steam, so that's why I'm using my household iron here instead of my Easy Press. This is such a great no-sew project for fall, and I think this tea towel looks adorable hanging in my kitchen. You can make these for any season, and now you know how easy it is to cut fabric with your Cricut in minutes. If you have little ones, you know how important it is to have a good bag for trick-or-treating. Check out the next project for a creative way that you can customize a DIY tote bag with Cricut. Here's another great Halloween design available in my fall bundle. We're going to make a trick-or-treat bag using layered vinyl. This is a great tutorial on how to layer different types of vinyl, including glitter vinyl. First, I'm starting by attaching all of the pieces that are the same color because I want to cut those in the same format and spacing that they are on the screen. So we'll do that just like we did in the prior projects, and I'll size it according to the tote bag that I'm planning to make. I'm going to be cutting on a mat, and here I can see a preview of all of my different colors. We do want to mirror this since this is going to be an iron-on vinyl project. I'm using everyday iron-on for the majority of the design, and then we'll come back and add in the glitter accent in the middle. This process should be straightforward, just adding each color vinyl as the software prompts you. I'm using glitter iron-on for the purple accent in the middle, so I'm going to make sure to choose that as my material type. Then we're just going to weed the negative space that we don't need, just like we do with any other type of vinyl project. Sometimes I think people get intimidated by the idea of mixing and matching different types of iron-on vinyl. That's why I wanted to do a project specifically mixing glitter iron-on and regular everyday iron-on. Here's my tote bag that I picked up at Target Dollar Spot, so always check the sales because you can find some good stuff for Cricut projects. I'm just placing my design to see more or less where I want it placed. I like to measure sometimes to get the spacing accurate, and sometimes I'll mark the corner of the carrier sheet as a guide. Then you'll want to preheat your tote bag, and all of the instructions are always found in the Cricut Heat Guide online, so you can check that out if you're unsure. I'm going to start with the glitter vinyl because it needs the highest temperature. Here, the instructions are to press it at 330 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 seconds, but instead of 30 seconds, I'm only going to press it 5 seconds. That's because I'm going to be pressing it more with each layer I add, so I don't want to start off by pressing it too much. Now I'm going to add the orange everyday vinyl, and I'm going to press this about 10 seconds. Even though you see 30 seconds on my heat press, I'm not going to give it the full amount of time because we still have more layers to add. Now I'm going to add in the pieces of the candy corns with the yellow and white, but since my carrier sheet is too small, I'm going to cover the whole design with one of these protective Teflon sheets. So that's something really handy to have if you do a lot of layered vinyl projects. Again, I'm only doing enough pressing in terms of time to get the vinyl to stick. I don't want to do the full 30 seconds since we're doing so many layers. Hopefully this makes it a little less intimidating for you. It is a multi-step process, but it's very doable. This trick-or-treat bag is something your kids can reuse every year, and I'm loving that glitter vinyl. These wooden blocks were actually scrap wood from a place that we had, so I decided to add some paint to them and create some spooky Halloween creatures. First, I'm starting with Frankenstein's monster, so I mixed a few different green acrylic paints that I had and painted it on all sides except the bottom. I found that typically 2 to 3 coats of paint works best, and you can use a matte paint like chalk paint or any other type of acrylic paint that's good for wood. I'm going to be making 3 blocks, so this block is going to be my little ghost, and then the next block will be a jack-o'-lantern. I've already primed these blocks with 1 coat of primer, and so it makes it a little easier to apply the other colors of paint. I found these little faces on Cricut Design Space, so I will put a link to the project down below. For this project, I'll be using my Cricut Joy just to show that that's possible. You can use any Cricut machine with this. I'm using a permanent vinyl here. You can also use removable vinyl, and what's nice about these wood blocks is that they all have black faces, so I didn't have to swap out any other colors of vinyl. It was really straightforward. I'm just weeding away the excess vinyl, and then I'm going to apply these to my blocks using some transfer tape. Whenever I'm using transfer tape like this, I always like burnishing it with this Cricut scraper tool. It just really helps to eliminate air bubbles and get a nice smooth application. So I'm just lifting that carrier sheet and placing it in the center of the block on one side, and then I'll burnish it again before removing that transfer tape. How simple is that? These are so easy to make, and we're going to add a few more embellishments before we're done, just to give them a little more character. For Frankenstein's monster, I took this little wood piece that I found at Dollar Tree, and these are going to be the little bolts on either side of his head, so I'm just using some hot glue to attach those. For my jack-o'-lantern, I thought it would look really cute to attach this wine cork on top as the stem. Then I'm going to wrap it with some raffia and Halloween ribbon that I think I picked up at Michael's one year, just to give it a little extra personality, and I think that it adds just the right touch to finish this off. If you'd like to give these Halloween wooden blocks more of a rustic or primitive vibe, you can go around the edges with dark wax, like I'm doing here, and then just wipe off a little bit of the excess. This just gives the blocks a little more dimension and character. So I did this to all 3 of mine, and I think they look really great when they're stacked on top of each other. You can use these as shelf sitters or on a tiered tray. Let me know down in the comments which of these characters is your favorite. I love a fall craft that works for the whole season, not just for Halloween. The next project is a great example of how you can make something spooky or just use it as general fall decor. If you have any of these glass food jars lying around, don't throw them away. Here's a great way to upcycle them using some vinyl from Dollar Tree. We're going to use the same pumpkin spice design that we used for our t-shirt earlier, and I'm going to remove some of the elements here. I want just the leaves and 1 pumpkin, so I'm going to use the contour tool to remove some of those unwanted pieces. This is going to leave me with just a solid pumpkin, which is perfect. I want all of these to cut on the same vinyl, so I'm just going to make sure they're all the same color and sized appropriately. I had never used Dollar Tree vinyl before, so this is the first time I've put it to the test. I went ahead and used the removable vinyl setting on my Cricut, but as you'll see in a moment, it actually cut all the way through like a die cut instead of a kiss cut. That's actually perfectly fine and makes my life a little bit easier, to be honest, for this craft, so just be aware that it will do that. I'm going to use a variety of fall colors for this project, and Mod Podge is going to be your friend. I'll explain why in a moment. I did want to mention I recently bought this awesome jelly roll of homespun fabrics that are going to be perfect for fall crafting. I'll also use a little bit of jute twine, potentially as an accent. So let's start by applying your design to your jar and making sure there are no air bubbles. This is going to be our stencil. So my trick when doing any kind of stencil is to apply a thin coat of Mod Podge around the edges of your stencil. This is going to help seal it in and prevent the paint from seeping under the stencil or vinyl once we start painting. I'm using a variety of matte paints for this project, but if you find that you're having trouble getting your paint to stick to glass, you may want to try sanding the glass first just to give it a rougher surface for the paint to adhere. I'm going to repeat the process for all 3 of my glass jars, and while one jar is drying, I can paint the next one. I ended up doing about 3 coats of paint on each jar, waiting about 20 or 30 minutes between coats. After all of the coats of paint have dried, it's time to reveal our stencil. I will caution you to be careful removing this vinyl because on the first one here, I ripped a little bit of paint off, which is fine. You can totally touch it up later. It's not a big deal, but I was a little more careful in removing the other stencils after this happened. What we're left with is a beautiful festive mason jar for fall. To add a little extra detail, I'm taking some of those fabric scraps and wrapping them around the mouth of the jar. You can also add wooden buttons or raffia or jute twine to give it a little more charm, and I did experiment with a few of these jars with some different details. I think these jars are perfect as candle holders, so I'm going to add a few LEDs, but first I'm going to fill the base of the jar with some pebbles that I had. You can also use corn or rice, anything that fits the season. You can even make these into candles or fill them with treats. I would just caution you to use a paint that is going to be water resistant if you choose to do that. I'm loving this little trio. Let me know what you think down in the comments. This next project is super quick and easy. We are going to make some glow-in-the-dark ghost decals. In Cricut Design Space, I've chosen a few different fun ghost characters, and then I'm simply going to cut it on glow-in-the-dark removable vinyl. These decals would look really great on your front windows for Halloween, but since it was early when I made this video, I decided not to put them on the front of our house just yet, but on a back patio door instead. If you want your kids to be able to stick these on windows, you can go ahead and weed the vinyl pieces that you don't need, like the eyes and the mouths, but they are actually easy enough to pull up, almost like a sticker, so you don't absolutely have to weed these. I'm going to prep my window by cleaning it first with some Windex, and I will say that the vinyl only glows from the front side, so if you want these to glow in the dark on the outside of your house, you would place them on the outside window. You can see here how easy it is just to peel these off since it's not a complex design, so you really don't have to weed them in advance. I'm going to also make sure that I smooth out any air bubbles using that scraper tool again. This is how my little ghosts look during the daytime, but of course the magic happens after dark, and here's a peek at what it looks like once the lights go down. You can see that it really does glow in the dark and gives a pretty cool effect that I think is perfect for Halloween. For our last project, we're going to make some really cute 3D paper pumpkins. I have a free SVG file you can download over on my blog, and then all you need to do is find some scrapbook paper in different patterns or colors and size your pumpkins appropriately. Once you have all of your pumpkin shapes cut out, you're going to fold them down the middle, and then you can use either a roller tape adhesive like this one, or I'm really liking the Bearly Art glue. It's great for paper crafting, so I've kind of switched over to that, and I will link that down below. But once you've attached all of the pieces, you will have a perfect pumpkin shape like this. Then we can add some fun embellishments like stems. I went with this beautiful copper cardstock for my stems and for some of the leaves as well, as you'll see in a minute. And this just adds a beautiful, shiny finish to these pumpkins. And you can do all kinds of different shapes with my cut files, like this pumpkin that has leaf cutouts. I also have some fun leaf designs, so you can do kind of a layered leaf like I did here with different colors of cardstock. There are just so many possibilities, and these budget-friendly pumpkins look great as decor for a party. Let me know which of these projects you liked best, and here I'll leave some videos for you to check out next. Hope to see you back here next time.